Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the new and not necessarily improved Darkstream, but we're doing the pre-recorded thing, the new focused Darkstream, let's call it that. And tonight I'm going to talk about leadership, and specifically the risks of leadership. And this is inspired by a recent column that I read on Outkick. Jason Whitlock wrote it. I posted about it on the blog. And what I'm responding to tonight is some of the discussion that surrounded that column. And to give you a little perspective, we're talking about the behavior of Drew Brees and his reaction to the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And we're not discussing this in the context of the what you feel about BLM or the NFL or any of that stuff. That's irrelevant. We're just talking about the leadership aspects of it. Okay, so that's what we're focused on here. Now, this was Drew Brees at the beginning. So at the beginning, he was standing for the national anthem, hand over the heart. He's a good patriotic American. And his comments when he was asked about BLM were, "I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country." He talked about how standing there for the anthem made him think of his two grandfathers, both of them fought in the U.S. military, probably during World War II or maybe later. Both risked their lives to protect our country and to make our country and this world a better place. Every time I stand with my hand over my heart looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military. And this is where it gets a little bit, you start to see where the problem is going to creep in. But for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movement of the 60s and all that's been endured by so many people up until this point. Is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart, it shows unity. It shows we're all in this together, we can all do better, and that we're all part of the solution. Now that's a heartfelt, relatively moderate position. Certainly it's something that was supported and welcomed by a lot of NFL fans. People were delighted to see that there was a player, a significant player, a Super Bowl winning quarterback who's clearly heading for the Hall of Fame, who is willing to stand up and support their position. But it only took a day before he was backtracking. He said, in an attempt to talk about respect, unity, and solidarity centered around the American flag and the national anthem, I made comments that were insensitive and completely missed the mark on the issues we're facing right now as a country. They lacked awareness and any type of compassion or empathy. Really? Instead, those words have become divisive and hurtful and have misled people into believing that I am somehow an enemy. This could not be further from the truth and is not an accurate reflection of my heart or my character. This is where I stand. I stand with the Black community in the fight against systemic racial injustice and police brutality and support the creation of real policy change that will make a difference. I condemn the years of oppression that have taken place throughout our Black communities and still exist today. I acknowledge that we as Americans, including myself, have not done enough to fight for that equality or to truly understand the struggles and plight of the Black community. I recognize that I am part of the solution and can be a leader for the Black community in this movement. And this was Drew Brees not very long ago. He's not standing up for the national anthem. He's not standing up for the flag. He's not standing up for the memory of his grandfathers. And this is what Whitlock was writing about because the New Orleans Saints have underperformed this year. They're expected to be serious playoff, even Super Bowl contenders, and yet suddenly they're not doing so well. And he suggested, and I think that it's a reasonable argument, a reasonable observation. It may or may not be correct, but he talked about how Drew Brees had sacrificed his leadership role on the team by backing down. Because one of the things that a leader has to do is lead. If you follow, you are not a leader. And you can't say that you're just changing your mind when you're clearly backing down in the face of furious criticism, when you're backing down in the face of threats and manipulation and all that sort of thing. It's fine for leaders to change their mind. It's necessary for leaders to change their mind when they're facing new circumstances. But there were no new circumstances here. All that happened was that it was made clear that his position was very unpopular. And this is one of the tests of a leader. What do you do when the people who are following you or supporting you or backing you, what do you do when they have a serious and significant difference of opinion than you? I'll give you a minor example from my own blog. When I first started paying attention to Jordan Peterson, it was immediately apparent to me that the guy was dishonest and that he was at least somewhat of an intellectual fraud. I didn't know how bad it was at the time. I didn't know the full extent of it. I hadn't read his books, hadn't watched his videos, so I didn't know anything in detail. But I knew enough to be able to say that with some degree of conviction. What was interesting was that there's a group of some of my strongest and oldest supporters. And I was reliably informed by one of the members that the opinion against me at that moment was about 80% against and 20% in support of what I was saying. Now, nobody knew. At the time, nobody knew for certain whether I was correct or not. But it was made very clear to me how upset and how angry a lot of these people, some of whom have backed every project that we've done for the last few years, that they were very unhappy with me. Now, if I had followed the Drew Brees model, I would have backed down. I would have stopped looking into Jordan Peterson. I would have backed off. I didn't, of course, because I was not interested in the opinions of these people who were, for lack of a better term, we'll just say supporters. And as it happened, most of those people now have come around to the way that I perceive Jordan Peterson. That's what they call opinion leadership. It's very different than quarterbacking an NFL team, but it is still a form of leadership. It's still the same choice that you have to make. And the thing that was so particularly cowardly about Drew Brees' decision is that he had made such a strong and emotional case for his position previously. So now he just not only is not providing leadership, he actually exposed himself to be a bit of a moral coward. Now, some people have made excuses for him, and this is specifically why they're making excuses for him. This is Derek Carr, the quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, he was early on fairly outspoken against the kneeling. In fact, he was probably the most outspoken against the kneeling of all the active NFL quarterbacks. And very shortly after that, his leg was broken, and a lot of people noticed that his linemen, who I don't know the race of all of his linemen, but you can see that at least one of them was of the African American persuasion. They didn't seem to be making much of an effort to protect him. And there were even people on the blog who were saying, well, if Drew Brees, if he hadn't backed down, then his teammates would have allowed him to be hurt. Maybe they would have even hurt him in practice, etc., etc. Now, obviously that could be true. It's possible that Derek Carr was permitted to be, knocked around and pounded on. I very much doubt that they intended for him to get his leg broken. I mean, that pretty much messed up their whole season. But I have no doubt that they were fine with letting him take a shot or two just to make it clear how unhappy they were with him, right? But here's the thing. If you're a leader, then you have to take those risks. Being a leader is not about risk avoidance. You can't be the leader and run away from challenges and people taking shots at you and so forth. You have to show up for the fight. I'm going to show you a statue here, and it's a statue at Fort Benning, and it's called Iron Mike. And it's also known as the Follow Me statue, which happens to be the motto of the 2nd Marine Division. And one of the interesting things that it says in the history of the 2nd Marine Division, a book that I have, is that the Marines have relatively low casualty rates among their regular soldiers, and they have some of the highest casualty rates among junior officers. And the reason is that those junior officers are expected to take the lead. Follow me, like I said, is literally the motto of the 2nd Marine Division. And what greater risk is there than taking the lead and charging towards the enemy that you can't see, that has all kinds of machine guns and mortars and artillery and rifles and what else? What risk can compare with that? But that's what they're expected to do. Here's an image of the beach on Tarawa, one of the most violent, bloodiest battles in U.S. military history. My grandfather was there. And I'll never forget one of the lessons that he taught me. And I don't know if it was based on his experience at Tarawa or his experience at Guadalcanal. But one of the things that he told me is that if you're on the beach and everybody's shooting at you and everybody's looking at each other trying to figure out what to do, he said, just give an order and go. He said, it doesn't even matter what it is. It doesn't even matter where you're going. He said, but you got to do something. He said, and the crazy thing is that you just might find that when you get to the trees, you turn around and look back, and there's 200 men behind you. He said, because you don't know if anybody's coming with you or not. But all you can do is get up, shout, "Follow me," and go. And I suspect he was actually speaking from personal experience, just because of the way that he phrased it, and also because of the fact that we found out, he retired as a lieutenant colonel. But he didn't go in as an officer. He was what they call a Mustang. An officer who was promoted from the ranks. And it's not unheard of, but it's not the most common way to become a lieutenant colonel. And I've always remembered what he told me whenever I've been forced to make decisions, whenever people that work for me, whether it's professionally, whether it's just projects with volunteers or whatever, when people come and say, should we do X, should we do Y, or should we do Z? Now, I try to understand as best I can what the issues are, but there's no guarantees. And one of the things that people often do when there's no guarantees is that they try to temporize. They try to avoid actually making the decision. And what I learned from my grandfather, whose chair I'm sitting in, by the way, those of you who admire the chair, this is my grandfather's chair, which I'm very pleased to have. But I always think of his words, and I just make the decision. Now that's not exactly the equivalent of storming the beaches against the Japanese. It's not even the equivalent of standing in the pocket behind a offensive line that might just be letting these 300-pound guys charge in and tackle you. But the concept is the same. If you're going to be a leader, then you have to accept the risks of leadership. Maybe you're going to get your leg broken. Maybe a Japanese machine gun is going to put a bullet through your leg, or worse. Maybe you're not going to make the perfect, optimal decision. But it doesn't matter, because you have to provide that direction. You have to make the choice. And here's the thing. When you show that you're willing to do that, people will begin to follow you. People will begin to trust you. Let me give you an example. I was talking to one of the Castalia production guys the other day, and he was commenting on how, apparently, unbeknownst to me, the Castalia guys all thought I was nuts when I said, let's start doing these leather books. Even though we had the success of the Junior Classics campaign, that was still only 100 people that were buying leather books. 100 people is not a basis for a business. But none of them said anything about this to me, because we've had enough success, and apparently they have enough confidence in my leadership that they just dove in. They went ahead. They did a great job. Here's one fruit of that. I finally got my my Meditations copy, and it's absolutely beautiful. We're all delighted with the results. But that doesn't happen if someone doesn't step up and consistently accept the risks of leadership, accept the possibility that people might not follow your lead. That's always going to be a risk. Even if you have a perfect track record, even if you're a Hall of Fame quarterback with a Super Bowl ring, people might not follow you. And maybe that's why Brees backed down, or who knows, maybe it was just because his his wife said that he should. We have no idea. But the important thing is that you don't want to be like a Drew Brees. If you take a stand and you're a leader, then you need to tell everybody else, follow me. This is the way. Maybe when you get to the trees, you'll look back and nobody will be behind you. But you can't know until you do it. So my advice to you, if you're in a position of leadership, is accept the risks. If you're supporting a leader, if you're a trusted follower, have confidence in your leader. Maybe even let him know that you trust him. Let him know that you have his back. It really makes people who are taking those risks feel more confident in taking them when people say, hey, I've got your back. When we first started Castalia, and I was a persona non grata in the science fiction community, the fact that John C. Wright was willing to say, yeah, you can publish me. I'm willing to stand with you guys. That made us much more confident about what we're doing. Now, I'm fortunate because with the VFM, with the Dread Ilk, I know people have my back. I get told that practically every day. But a lot of people in positions of leadership, large and small, don't hear that. So if you're supporting one of those people, if you're following one of those people, let them know. Tell them, hey, look, I know you're putting yourself out on this one. I'm with you. It's worth a shot anyhow. I'm Voxday. This is the Darkstream.